Nice. Sweet. So today I decided to choose well, we're not doing a book really. It's more like a paper club, like a seminar style thing. But we'll be talking a little bit about well, the topic is consciousness, free will, and determinism. And the paper is by a philosopher named Galen Strawson, a pretty famous contemporary philosopher, on why determinism isn't very important when it comes to the discussion of free will or of whether or not we have free will. Almost always you'll hear it's like, oh, it's either free will or determinism. And in this paper, he's going to try and present some arguments that show us whether or not determinism is true or false. It has little impact, or at least it's not as much of a blow to free will as we may usually think. Usually we think it's like one or the other. Galen Strawson in this paper, he's saying, well, not really, no. Whether or not it's true or false doesn't change much about free will or how we understand free will. So he starts off this paper kind of going over a lot of these terms, explaining what determinism is, explaining how we're understanding consciousness, and so on and so on. It's also a response to Heinrich's book, like a really big book on determinism. But one of the first things he sets out to do is explain a little bit why determinism is important. And you guys have probably already thought about these things, but in just like normal intro philosophy, you can think that, okay, well, if we have a deterministic worldview, so that means if everything is caused by an event that happened before, then how do we judge moral actions? How do we praise people for certain moral actions if they were going to do that either way? How would we punish criminals who do something bad if they would have just done so either way? So there's big implications when it comes to determinism in the traditional discussion of free will. One is of obviously punishment. So if we have actions, if all of our actions are predetermined, can we really punish the criminal? Can we really punish Hitler if he had no choice but to do what he did? Same thing with praise. If someone does like saves a baby from a burning building, if that was going to happen either way, if everything was predetermined, if there was like no free will involved, then why are we, giving a thumbs up and patting those people on the back? And then, kind of alongside both of those things is what type of responsibility do we have as agents if we don't have any autonomy? If we're not following the causal chain of events, then it would make sense, yes, to have a type of responsibility. But if everything just a chain of dominoes, then it's almost like we're not responsible for what we end up doing or for what we have done. So these are kind of the important things to keep in mind when we're discussing determinism. And the way Heinrich is understanding determinism is pretty close to this way. He's saying that, well, if we accept determinism the way we're understanding it right now, it poses a threat to our conceptions as moral and responsible agents. If all of our actions were predetermined, then everything we end up doing will have just been a result of anterior causes. So there's no like willing or moving or driving force behind our decisions that are worthy of praise or punishment. Strawson pushes back a tiny bit, and he says, "Well, like hold on, Heinrich. I understand that determinism might be a bit of a threat, but I think you're kind of misplacing this threat, or you're misunderstanding the conclusion that would follow from determinism being true." Strawson is kind of saying that whether or not determinism is actually the way the world works, or whether or not the world works in an indeterministic way, that is to say, in a more or less random way, neither of those two options, the truth of determinism nor the falsity of determinism, is very relevant when we're talking about free will, or the whole free will debate. Attitudes and practices that we engage in day-to-day life don't really hinge on the veracity of determinism. So he's only a little bit right, is what Strawson's kind of trying to push forward. He's saying, yes, Heinrich, we need to like consider determinism when we're talking about free will, but it's not an end-all be-all. It's not like if determinism is true, then free will goes down the shitter. Like that's just not how we should be looking at this stuff. That's how I'm understanding this paper, at least. So very, very basically, Strawson is understanding or defines determinism in this paper as the common understanding that we just kind of went over. Every event has a cause, even if, and I think this is a really important part that people miss, every event has a cause, even if it's hidden or complicated. So it doesn't need to be the case that we fully understand all of the intricacies and subatomic quirks that go behind each event and each action. We just know that there must be, or if determinism is true, then it must be the case that each cause has some sort of effect. Determinism is kind of like the opposite, I want to say, or just like the random version of determinism. So it's saying that some events have no like linear deterministic cause. It's not like a domino chain of events that we can look at and then be certain that one cause led to another cause, led to another cause, and so on. Things like quantum randomness are brought up in this paper. And Strawson is trying to say here that, well, even if, and this is just something to think about as we get into the arguments, even if quantum randomness ends up dictating what happens in the world at like a macro scale, these things are still kind of random, and it's not playing a role in our decision making. When you choose to do something, that's an autonomous choice versus an indeterministic thing, like a quantum randomness, which is just like a flip of a coin. You're not choosing for it to, you're not willing for it to be heads or tails. So like he's just saying that whether or not it's deterministic or indeterministic, that has nothing to do with the discussion of free will. Ultimately, both of them are unprovable, he says, because on one hand, if we can't see the causes behind each action, they may just be hidden or complex. And then if we can see all of them, then it might just be deterministic, but we can't be completely sure because of quantum randomness and so on and so on. So it's a bit up in the air. He's not making any definitive claims about what the nature of the world is. He's not saying that it is deterministic or isn't deterministic. He's just saying that it doesn't really matter when we're talking about free will. Then he goes on and talks about consciousness a little bit and kind of explains how Heinrich is understanding consciousness and why it might be a little bit problematic to understand consciousness in the way that Heinrich is understanding it. But Heinrich, he describes consciousness or conscious experience, as he talks about in his book, as something which requires both a subject, so like a me, an I, and then a content, so like the thing itself or a phenomenon experience. So for example, I'm experiencing like the light coming at me. The content would be the light, and then I would be the subject. And there's a common objection that comes up in philosophy of mind, especially with people who are people like Wittgenstein and like Kripke and Quine and all these people, more like metaphysicians. And they bring up grammatical analogies. They say, okay, well, let's think about the structure of language. When we're making a sentence, we have subjects, and then we have the things that those subjects are characterized by. Maybe that's a way of saying it. It's kind of like when you say there's a picture, there needs to be a picture of something when you're making a sentence. When you say, look, a picture, you're referring to the thing that's in the picture. Like any of these picture frames that are in here, they're of something. They have content to some extent. You can't have a contentless picture. And that's the analogy that certain philosophers kind of bring up, this objection against conscious experience and content. So they say, okay, well, things in the world, they need a subject and content. But, Strawson says, well, that's only like, that's a little, it sounds cool, but it's not the full story. Because when it comes to subjective experience, you can have the same content, the same thing, but different individual experiences of that thing. So it's not a very fair analogy that we're making. For example, if I present, or if two people get pinched, both of them are experiencing the content of pain, but their experiences of pain are qualitatively different. One person is experiencing pain in a certain type of way and the other one in another particular certain type of way. Whereas when we're talking about a picture, the content of the picture stays the same. It's kind of like objective. So this is what he's kind of saying, and making sure that we're understanding when we're discussing consciousness. That yes, things have a subject and have content, but when we're talking about conscious experience, we cannot make that grammatical objection because conscious experiences are phenomenally and qualitatively distinct from one another. Then he brings about, then he kind of clarifies a couple other points, which maybe you guys have come across these terms in like intro philosophy classes, and that's basically qualia. So just kind of like repeating what I was saying is that things have a subjective and qualitative experience to them. When you see the color red, it has like a certain impression on you that only you have access to. It's like trying to explain the color red to a blind person. It's almost like out of their reach. You can get a little bit close. You can explain that it's like warm and that it's something that like hits your eyeballs. But it will never be the same thing as experiencing the red itself. Same thing with physical things like pain and so on. Strawson critiques this definition that a lot of philosophers use when defining consciousness, which is basically they define consciousness as something which X is something that is like, how do I define? X is something that it is like to be like X, right? Which is kind of like a circular definition. It's like saying, what is it like to be a human? Oh, well, to be a human is to experience humanness. It's like a circular type of explanation. And a lot of people use this when we're discussing consciousness. What is it like to be conscious? Oh, it's to have the experience of consciousness. So it's a bit circular. And Strawson doesn't really like this. So he kind of like corrects that. He says, no, we need a more solid, non-circular definition of consciousness. The next point he goes over before getting into like his actual argument, he's just kind of like laying the groundwork right now so everyone's on the same page. But the next thing he comes up with is this psychoneurology, or this intimate relationship that neuroscience or the physical neural patterns going on in our brain have to mental events and things that we're experiencing. So almost any mental event you look at has, or now we know thanks to like brain imaging and like advanced technologies with scanning and all that type of stuff, we know that nearly every single mental event has a corresponding or correlating neural state. You prick someone with a needle and you're going to see certain neurons in the motor cortex fire. You flash a white light in someone's eyes and you're going to see certain layers of the visual cortex fire. So we know that every time someone is experiencing or reporting a mental event, there are neural states that complete or almost completely go hand in hand with that thing. The hard problem of consciousness, the thing that we talked about 2 weeks ago with David Chalmers' paper, was that we don't know how all of these physical processes, so how these neural states end up giving rise to the subjective phenomenal experience of those feelings. So we don't know why a couple of neurons activating in the motor cortex lead to us feeling pain from a subjective point of view. There's like a bit of a gap there that we still don't understand. And Strawson here is trying to highlight that. And he's trying to say that, yes, we have these intimate relationships, but we don't know why they work the way they work. So his reasoning goes, it's either our physical ontology is incomplete. That's to say that we don't fully know what it means for stuff to be physical, or we must accept a form of like dualism in the Cartesian sense of dualism. Like either we don't really understand what's physical, or we have some sort of a spirit or some sort of a psyche, some sort of non-physical aspect to our minds that are responsible for these subjective experiences. And then this is where I bring in, this is like a bit of a tangent, but this is exactly what Hempel's dilemma is kind of pushing forward in philosophy of mind. And Hempel's dilemma is a two-horned argument. And it basically goes like saying, well, if the physical means whatever our physics says right now, then it's almost certainly false. Well, why? Well, it's because physics isn't complete just yet. There's still a lot of holes in our understanding of the universe and our understanding of how physics works. We still haven't reconciled quantum physics and classical physics. There's holes in all this type of stuff. So if we're saying, physical is what the physicists say physical is, then we have an incomplete answer. On the other hand, if we say, physical is, or what is physical, is whatever the future physicists say, then physicalism just becomes like trivially true. We have no idea. We're just uninformed. We're just saying like, okay, well, I guess we don't know. We're putting our hands in the air. It's vacuously true, essentially. So this is Hempel's dilemma. Either we say, okay, what's physical is what the future theories of physics will say, which leads us nowhere. And then at the same time, we can't say it's what's physical now, because if we say what's physical now, we know that what's the physics of now are incomplete. So that's also incorrect. So it's like a tricky predicament that we're put into when we're discussing conscious states, these neural correlates, and then what is physical at the end of the day. So with all of that kind of like groundwork set out, the point of the paper is, well, what happens if determinism is true? And these are 4 points that Heinrich outlines. So there's 4 big things in life that will be affected if it happens to be the case that determinism is the nature of reality. And he says the first one is that life hopes, personal goals, things in the future, achievements, all that type of stuff, it's threatened almost. Um, any type of goal you score, any type of degree you obtain, any type of person you meet, none of these accomplishments or none of these successes or these triumphs are really yours. And that's very disheartening. It's like it's almost like all the credit is being taken away, the rugs being swept from under you. The next big issue that occurs when if we are to accept that determinism is the case, it's that knowledge claims. So what we believe to be true, that also may have been predetermined. So when you think that you're thinking, you're really not actively engaging in that thought process. It's just it's like illusory. Every type of belief you have, whether you believe in God, whether you believe there's a hand in front of you, all of these things are predetermined. We cannot obtain truth in any meaningful way. Strawson doesn't care too much about this point. He cares a little bit more about the first point, and then about the third point, about relationships, who you choose to be friends, who you choose to fall in love with, all these types of things. Strawson also doesn't these argument or these premises or these points, let's say, they don't grip him very much. It's really the first one and then the last one that he's concerning himself with in his arguments or in his points, which is that it doesn't really matter whether or not things are determined or not. Last one is moral and moral responsibility or morality, essentially. So, like, should we should we punish the criminal and praise the hero? A plus on that test, no more credit to you, and you feel like depressed, dismay, and so on. The other reaction you can have is transience or transgence. I'm not really sure what that means, but the way he explains it is in saying a full out rejection, saying, nope, I don't like that, don't believe it, putting your foot down, I reject it, whatever, close your eyes, walk the other way. The final one, the more reasonable reaction, Strawson says, is that of affirmation. So it would be like saying, okay, determinism is true. Since that's true, what do I do now? How can I move on? Are things still meaningful? Can I still make something of the world? Challenging, I would say, a noble reaction to have to the determinism of the world, or the determinism of reality, I guess. However, this is where Strawson starts to kind of engage with the argument or like put forward some things. And he's saying that ultimate responsibility, or in other words, free will, like true free will, the way most people understand it, ultimate responsibility, it fails and is inadequate for accounting for possible free will. Why? Because of this infinite regress of choice. If you want to choose something, you must already have had preferences to that thing being chosen. If you already had those preferences to that thing being chosen, then where do those preferences come from? It's almost like pointing at any type of instance of free will and saying, well, why did you choose that to be the case? Where did that choice come from? It must have been from a preference. That preference must have originated somewhere because something can't come from nothing. Infinite regress, you're kind of screwed, free will people. Indeterminism cannot provide genuine origination. So remember, indeterminism is just the point of view that at the basis of reality, things are random. Quantum randomness, you can call it. But we know that randomness or chance isn't the same thing as autonomy or authorship. Just because things are random doesn't mean you willed them to be that way. And that's a quite powerful claim to make against Heinrich here. So like whether or not things are determined or indetermined, that doesn't matter for your authorship or for your will for your life. His argument strategy. This is where it gets like a little bit like reflective, and where, to be quite honest, I still haven't thought about it too much. I just finished the paper a couple like half hour, 1 hour ago. But he asks the reader a couple of questions. He says, would the falsity of determinism, so would determinism being wrong, help preserve the threatened aspects of agency? The aspects of agency like goals, moral responsibility, relationships with others, how we come to know things. Because consider belief formation. If what you end up believing at the end of the day is partly random, would we better reach truth or would we not better reach truth? And that's a tricky one for me to answer. I do not have a good answer. Hopefully you guys have something to say there, because if it's the case that all beliefs are indeterministic, is there a better way to get to knowledge? Or is it just at the whims of randomness? So in that sense, indeterminism just doesn't really rescue free will. It doesn't really rescue moral responsibility, because we wouldn't end up knowing what's morally correct, what's morally incorrect. Finally, the last little thing I'll say before we can just talk more generally is that Strawson here is saying it's not free will versus determinism. It's like free will versus any other possibility. Or maybe not even versus. It's just that it's a totally different conversation to be having. Determinism and indeterminism is completely outside of the realm of free will. It's not very important. Maybe it plays like a small role in certain things, like how you were raised, and how you were raised, leads you to act in certain ways. Maybe like at some level it plays a role, but fundamentally, when you choose vanilla versus chocolate, when you're at the ice cream shop, whether or not things are determined or indetermined, chance versus structure, that has nothing to do with autonomy and authorship. This uncaused origination, as you call it, is impossible, because you can't get something from nothing. And he urges us to focus a little bit more on practical, experience-based agency. So simply because things feel that they're autonomous, maybe that's just enough. Maybe it's enough that it seems like we have free will, and we can just leave it at that. It would be a different discussion if it didn't feel like we had free will, but I would think that most people have a sense, at least to some extent, that you're choosing to do things for yourself. His key takeaway basically is that it doesn't really matter. Determinism doesn't really matter when it comes to moral responsibility. But that's everything I had understood from that paper. Yeah. Any comments, questions? holes you want to poke.
Hmm, maybe add. I think that's like my observation with determinism and how maybe it affects people is I see also that the way we imagine determinism, like we conceive of it, like this kind of mental representation of maybe all my decisions being, in some sense, everything I do will be predetermined by some past causes and all of that. The picture, in some sense, um, has this psychological effect of constraining our decision space in some sense, and because of that, I think it will make a lot of people feel, in some sense, uncomfortable, as if they were physically constrained. And I think that this may lead to trying to kind of overcome the idea of determinism because it would feel like a constraint on us. Um, and I think that might be also a issue of like incorrect reification of the concept.
That's a really good point. That's what I was thinking too, a little bit at least, but I like the way you put it more as like a psychological constraint. Like no one would want to be tied down to their chair, right? To be like physically constrained. Same thing goes with what we can think of, how creative we can be. If someone all of a sudden puts like guidelines or guide rails to the way we can think or to the way we can cognate, that's very uncomfortable. I like the way you put that. Yeah,
Yes, I think it's
there was
that's like
this. Sorry.
no, I just like wanted to complete. I think like there's like even if things were determined, like there might be kind of like a psychological freedom which is like innate to kind of the way brain operates.
Hmm. Yeah, like we. I think most people are predisposed to to think that we have will, just because it. I don't know. It feels like it. There was this really interesting study of like life outcomes that I don't know if I'm trying to remember what university they did it at. But it was relatively recent, maybe like last 20 years or something like that. And basically what they did in this study is they asked people a bunch of questions, and all of these questions were supposed to more or less put them on a spectrum from like hard determinism to complete free will. And they found out it was a longitudinal study. So they followed these people after like years and years and years. And they found that the people with the sense of free will ended up having better life outcomes, better social relationships, better mental health, better coping abilities with stress, just like better general life outcomes than those who were more rigid and more cynical on the other end. So it does that. I don't know. That finding kind of lends itself to the practical case of treating life like it is really free.
That's interesting. I didn't know about the study, but yeah, it kind of makes sense.
Mhm. And then there's like an even tougher question to ask yourself. It's like, would you rather good life outcomes or to know the truth? And I was thinking about that the other day. Like, is the truth more important or is being okay and happy more important? I'm
Uh,
curious if you guys have any intuitions on that.
I don't think truth is necessarily like an issue. I think like the problem might be like in the incorrect reification, like when an idea becomes like we said, like constrained. But I mean, I know some people who are definitely like deterministic and they don't. I don't think it affects their life that much, and I think it can even have a positive effect because you may let go of like bad things that happen more easily, and it's like you don't cling to like to some things that happen to you as harshly because you know it's like it happened. It was in some sense determined, and you can move on. So yeah,
That's a good
that's
point.
what.
Yeah, that would be interesting to look into, like the positive um, outcomes of thinking deterministically. I like
Yeah.
that. I'm
And
gonna think about
also,
that.
some people who often like practice some kind of meditative practices, and they have sometimes like ideas which sound to me deterministic, or like they say that you cannot predict what is your next thought going to be because it's like unknown, and in that sense, the making a choice is kind of like a process of discovery, and I like this frame or like way of looking at it.
Yeah, no, like it just seems the discussion is always about whether or not that thought came from preceding causes. But that almost doesn't matter because we're not in control of those causes
Mhm.
or of those things that like led up to it. So we can just treat it like an authentic thought that's just coming up,
Yeah,
like bubbling up. Interesting. Anything else you guys would want to add? I might make this one a little bit shorter because I'm currently in Albania and I would like to go explore the city a little bit.
well, I maybe I just maybe also add on the consciousness. I'm also curious, like because I wasn't on the Chalmers book group 2 weeks ago. I
Mhm.
didn't know there was one, but I like really the consciousness topic. And are you maybe aware with philosopher David Pearce?
David Pierce, what are his famous papers?
He doesn't really post like in papers, but he has more like a form of a lot of like online essays, and he's
Mhm.
more known in like a transhumanist type of philosophy, but and also like abolishing suffering. But he has some interesting thoughts on consciousness, which I think are very similar to
Mhm.
Strawson's, are like in this kind of realm of. I think like he calls it like a non-materialist physicalism, and
Mhm.
uh, yeah, I think I
I'll look
think that
into him. Yeah.
he has
Can you type his name? Type his
yeah,
name in the chat.
yeah, in the sure.
Thanks.
I will also can also type the link to a site he has for the essay on consciousness and physicalism. And in some
Go for it.
sense, it aligns a lot with Strawson. I think he cites in some. Yeah, I think yeah he bases a lot of it on Strawson. The difference is that Strawson is kind of more neutral on the like physical on the physicalist conception of
Mhm.
what the physical is, and Pierce kind of goes more into like this idea of the physical as the mental being an intrinsic aspect of the physical, like the equations, like he takes the physical he defines physicalism as essentially that every like the world is exhaustively defined described by the equations of physics, but is neutral about the ontological nature of that which the equations of physics describe.
Okay. Well
Yes,
put.
and he basically makes like the case that well maybe it's actually the mental is the intrinsic nature of the physical. It's like
Mhm.
the equations of physics describe behavior of qualia, and yeah, I think it's like an interesting correlation to
Mhm.
Strawson's to build on the Strawson's because I haven't read other Strawson's papers on consciousness, so maybe he also built on it more.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
I'd be interested in hearing how he responds to the Hempel's dilemma that was like in one of the slides. Like if you're saying that what's physical is all of the equations that physics uses, we know that some of the equations aren't they're only like approximately true,
oh yes, yes.
not tautologically true.
Yeah,
Like Newtonian mechanics, they kind of break down sometimes if you like pull them to their extremes. So I'd be interested to see like his responses to that.
yeah.
Um,
I think
maybe it
that
gets better as time goes on.
I think like we sometimes physicalism can be like taken as trivially true, but also I use it kind of like interchangeably with naturalism, like just to distinguish it like from views like Mysterianism, or like the type of views which say that you cannot possibly know what is consciousness or how it works, or the views which
Mm.
would try to treat it as supernatural. I think like to
Mm.
distinguish it, at least from that area, it may be helpful. But other than that, I
Yeah,
think yeah, it's like it can be in some sense trivially true.
yeah. If you like that type of stuff, like here are some Kim, Papineau, Bennett, and Chalmers. They're your guys for like philosophy of mind and physicalism and all that stuff.
Nice. I
Super good.
wasn't of the first two. I wasn't aware of, so I would definitely Kim. But is it like Jagon Kim? Like the
Yeah, Jack One Kim.
oh, okay, okay. So
And
the first one.
then
Okay.
also Sophie Gibb was another one that I came across that was good. And then those are the only ones I can think of right now. I remember reading them like 2 years ago in a philosophy of mind course, and they were like super good. They like explain everything in a relatively easy to understand way.
Oh, that's interesting. I will
Yeah.
check them out. Yeah, David Pierce has like I think very good, like good philosophy of mind, but his essays are sometimes difficult to read. But yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
Hi, Kate.
What's up?
How have you been?
Doing all right. Did the book club go well?
Yeah, it was relatively short. Just like a little presentation. Not a ton of people, but still fun. Me and Jeb have just been hanging out.
I mean, I like the philosophy of mind talk, so
Yeah. A
I'm
lot
already
of
reading
I
this
don't know.
paper that he sent. It's interesting.
Reading the paper. This one?
Yeah,
Oh,
the
no, no.
non-physical.
I'll read that later. I will read that later, but that's on my to-do list. Yeah. I made plans to go get dinner with a friend. So I will log off now. But hopefully next time or this time next week we can do another paper, maybe even start a book. The only thing is I don't have any books with me right now other than like the Odyssey or Plato. Um so we'll see what we do.
Cool.
But
Sounds good.
do you have the last? You sent me the last recording, right? Of your book club?
Probably. I don't know.
I think
I
I think
haven't
I have
done a
like
book
three or
club in a
four.
few weeks, so
Oh, okay, okay. Nice. Yeah, I
yeah.
think I have the ones that you did send me posted up, and then I'll get Ori's up today, hopefully, if the Wi-Fi is decent here.
Yeah, I think he might be done with this too. He said that was probably the last
Mhm.
they'll do
Yeah, he
on
sent me the
Plato.
final
I don't
one.
know though. Well, I think he's just done
Oh,
with book clubs now or something.
I mean, yeah, it's
I think he
it's like
got
a half. It's like
frustrated.
a job in itself. Oh, but yeah, that too.
Yeah.
Frustrated that no, that they weren't as clever as him in Plato.
And no one's as clever as me.
Okay, dope. I got to rock and roll, but super nice chatting, Jeb. Nice saying hi for like 2 seconds, Cade. Hopefully we can play
Yeah.
Minecraft together soon.
Yeah, it was nice to talk to you.
Yeah, I mean the server's up, so so I need to
Oh,
whitelist you again so you can send me your username on Minecraft again.
will do. Once I'm back in Vancouver and I have some time to kill, which will be for like 2 weeks, I'll grind again.
Alright, sounds good. See ya.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Bye, friends.
Bye.